The People's Temple of the Disciples of Christ, commonly shortened to People's Temple, was a new religious movement founded in 1955 by Jim Jones. By the mid-1970s it included over a dozen locations in California, including its headquarters in San Francisco. It is best known for the events of November 18, 1978, in Guyana, in which 918 people died at the People's Temple Agricultural Project on nearby airstrip at Port Kaituma, and Georgetown in an organized mass murder-suicide. The mass suicide and killings at Jonestown resulted in the greatest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act prior to the events of September 11, 2001. Casualties at the airstrip included, among others, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan. Before California, Indiana formation. Before forming a church, Jim Jones had become enamored by communism and frustrated by the harassment communists received in the U.S. This, among other things, provided a seminal inspiration for Jones, as he himself described in a biographical recording. "I decided, how can I demonstrate my Marxism? The thought was, infiltrate the church. So I consciously made a decision to look into that prospect." Although he feared a backlash for being a communist, Jones was surprised when a Methodist superintendent helped him into the church, despite his knowledge that Jones was a communist. In 1952, Jones became a student pastor in Somerset's Southside Methodist Church in Indianapolis, but left that church because it barred him from integrating African Americans into his congregation. In 1954, Jones began his own church in a rented space in Indianapolis, at first naming it the Community Unity Church. Jones had previously witnessed a faith healing service at the Seventh-day Baptist Church, and concluded that such healings could attract people and generate income, helping accomplish his social goals. Jones and Temple members knowingly faked healings because they found that the increased faith generated financial resources to help the poor and finance the church. These healings involved chicken livers and other animal tissue, claimed by Jones to be cancerous tissues removed from the body. In 1956, Jones bought his first church building, in a racially mixed Indianapolis neighborhood. He first named this church Wings of Deliverance, and later that year renamed it the People's Temple for Gospel Church. The first time he used the phrase, People's Temple, Jones' healings and purported clairvoyant revelations attracted spiritualists. Indianapolis expansion. In order to increase publicity, the temple organized large religious conventions with other Pentecostal pastors. Jones continuing to disguise the fact that he was using religion to further social goals. Those conventions drew as many as 11,000 attendees, as Jones and the other preachers conducted healings, and impressed attendees by revealing private information, usually numbers, such as addresses, phone numbers, or social security numbers, which private detectives could easily discover beforehand. Jones and Temple members also drove through various cities in Indiana and Ohio on recruiting and fundraising efforts. The temple stressed egalitarian ideals, asking members to attend in casual clothes so poor members would not feel out of place, and providing shelter for the needy. While the temple had increased its African American membership from 15% to nearly 50%. In order to attempt further gains, the temple hired African American preacher Archie A. James. Pastor A. James was one of the first to commit to Jones' Socialist Collective program. In 1959, the church joined the Christian Church, and was renamed the People's Temple Christian Church for Gospel. This affiliation was a successful attempt to both raise the dwindling membership and restore the reputation of the organization. In February 1960, the temple opened a soup kitchen for the poor, and expanded their social services to include rent assistance, job placement services, free canned goods, clothing, and coal for winter heating. Jones and his wife helped to increase the temple's soup kitchen service to an average of about 2,800 meals per month. The temple's public profile was further elevated when Jones was appointed to the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission. He engaged in public attempts to integrate businesses, and was the subject of much local media coverage. Changes and religious communalism. Jones had read extensively about Father Divine, the founder of the International Peace Mission movement. Jones and temple members visited Divine several times, while Jones studied his writings and tape recordings of his sermons. The temple printed Divine's texts for its members and began to preach that members should abstain from sex and only adopt children. In 1959, in a sermon in his Delaware Street temple, Jones tested the new fiery rhetorical style that Divine had used. His speech captivated members with lulls and crescendos, as Jones challenged individual members in front of the group. The speech also marked the beginning of the temple's underlying "as versus them" message. Jones carefully wove in that the temple's home for senior citizens was established on the basis, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, quoting Karl Marx's critique of the Gotha program. He did so knowing that his Christian audience would recognize the similarities with text from the Acts of the Apostles which stated, "Distribution was made to each as any had need." Jones would repeatedly cite that passage to paint Jesus Christ as a communist, while at the same time attacking much of the text of the Bible. The temple began tightening its organization, asking more of its members than did other churches. It required that members spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with its temple family, rather than with blood relatives. The beginning of a process to wean members from families and redirect their lives toward a total commitment to the temple's social and political goals. Jones began to offer a deal towards a socialist collective, which he referred to as religious communalism, in which members would donate their material possessions to the temple in exchange for the temple meeting all those members' needs. Pastor James was one of the first to commit. However, the temple had little luck converting most Midwesterners to communist ideals, even when disguised as religion. Admiring Fidel Castro's 1959 overthrow of Batista in Cuba, Jones traveled to Cuba in 1960 to attempt to convert poor Cuban blacks to move to his congregation in Indiana, but the plan failed. The temple's religious message transitioned during this period to one treading between atheism and the subtle notion that Jones was a Christ-like figure. While temple aides complained privately, Jones said that the new message was needed to foster members' dedication to the temple's larger goals. Jones maintained such implications until the mid to late 1970s. In 1961, Jones claimed he had had a vision of Chicago coming under a nuclear attack. He claimed that Indianapolis would also be destroyed, convincing aides that the temple needed to look for a new location. A 1962 Esquire magazine article listed the 9 safest places to be in a nuclear war, with Belo Horizonte, Brazil, topping the list, because of its location and atmospheric conditions. Jones traveled through Brazil from 1962 through early 1963. He requested money from the temple while in Rio de Janeiro, but the temple lacked adequate funds for such a request because of shrinking finances in Jones' absence. Jones sent a preacher that had become a follower in Brazil back to Indiana to help stabilize the temple.